Welcome, Savvy Seeker, to the Spiritual Phoenix podcast. This is your audio oasis and paranormal portal. You can experience legendary guests, thought-provoking tarot readings, astonishing astrological forecasts, and exposure to ideas intent on igniting your unlimited inspiration. Subscribe today to keep your fire burning. One last thing, you are encouraged to reach out and ask questions. Become a part of the show. Now please enjoy today's episode. Welcome back, everybody. We are here once again with Stefanie Caponi. Stefanie, how's life treating you?
Life is great, Ross. How's everything going with you?
Better this week than it has been, so things are on the up and up. Real quick, would you tell everybody what we're doing in case I get it wrong?
First of all, you never get it wrong. And second of all, we are doing the Fool's Guide to Tarot, where every week Ross and I go through sequentially the major arcana cards and their accompanying minors. And today we are on the Tens and the Wheel of Fortune. That's
super exciting. I'm really ready to go through it. But real quick, I wanted to do a recap on the Hermit, and then I also wanted to tell you my Hermit camping story.
You know, I was going to ask you how your camping trip went.
Let's go through the recap of the Hermit. So the major arcana card of the Hermit is mainly about just self-reflection, looking back on life and integrating your total experience. What else would you add to that?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that we all incarnate into our human bodies with lifetimes of knowledge. And I think that by being in hermit mode and kind of stepping away and learning how to tap back into yourself is how you access some of that knowledge from past lives, but also on a less spiritual level, I think it's really important that we take a break from social media and from the news and from asking everybody's opinion about every little thing that happens to us, and really sit with what our own inner knowing is to figure out what is right and how to make decisions that are more aligned for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
And share it with others.
Yeah, finding your own truth and sharing it is so much more valid than kind of asking everybody else what your truth is and then sitting in what everybody else's definition is. Finding the center point between that, I think, is really where harmony comes in. But finding your own truth first is more important. Everybody else's opinion will always be there. Like, it's not going anywhere.
Exactly.
And real quick, what were the other nines? What's like the bullet points of them?
So the nines are about, again, like the Hermit, they're deeply alone in their suits. So they're alone in their element. And really figuring out what that means for you. So the Nine of Pentacles is about what you accomplish on your own and being really grateful for it. I believe that the Nine of Wands is about, we talked about that, like, rugged individualism and thinking that you have to take all of this action on your own behalf. And maybe the cycle of that is ending, because nines are about endings and cycles becoming complete. And we'll look at that more today in the tens. So the Nine of Wands is about kind of opening up. Nine of Cups is about another kind of gratitude card, about all of, your cups overflowing and being able to tap into feeling that joy in your body emotionally. And then, and I think we said too about, like, when you can feel it in your body, then you'll begin to see it before it happens. And then things start to happen. That's like I don't know if you've heard this before, but the Nine of Cups has been known as like the wish card. And
no, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I've read it in a few decks where they're like, this is a wish card. When the card comes up, you can make a wish. And I can only liken that to, if you can feel it energetically, then you're ready to see it. You feel it before it comes. That's kind of like a wish. And Nine of Swords is the card about anxiety and thinking irrational thoughts and being able to overcome that.
Yeah, definitely. I like all of those descriptions, and I can really relate to a lot of that. So I'm going to do my hermit story super quick so we can move on to everything else. It's a lot to like condense, but I'll do my best. So like I went on this whole trip, and prior to that, I'd been going through some rough things in my life, and I'd been listening to this book on audiobook or whatever called The Art of Showing Up, and it's by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And it's kind of about how you show up in relationships and show up for yourself. And one of the key talking points of that is kind of talking about conditional love and unconditional love. And then through this whole process of shutting my phone off, disconnecting, being by myself, I recognize that like as far as I've come in the past several years with like healing and dealing with my mental health issues and getting off of substance abuse and kind of reworking everything, I was being very conditional in my self-love in the sense that I'd created all this structure in my life that on the surface seemed really healthy, but it was actually really destructive and damaging in how I was going about it. And that was kind of profound for me to really understand how much things that can be good for us can actually be used as a new way to hurt ourselves. And that was like earth shattering to me. That was like one of the good insights that I got from it. And then it also made me realize how being able to sit alone by yourself with no distractions and no real escapism for 24 hours, that takes some like, I couldn't have fathomed that at any other point in my life to do so without any substances to escape from, just to be present. So that was super cool. I stayed up most of the night, slept in a hammock too. So it was cool to like look at all of the stars and see the moon, and gave myself a tarot reading, which was super spot on. So yeah, it was an awesome experience.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that a lot of times when we're in the process, which this is kind of perfect to go into Wheel of Fortune, when we start our healing journeys and our world expands into these different modalities to help us, we get to this point where it's time to kind of move on from there and level up from it. But it becomes, like you said, it's like a crutch and a comfort zone that becomes disruptive or destructive, and not because you're meaning it for it to, just it becomes another way to kind of zone out and be in a comfort zone instead of more moving forward and trying something new and challenging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's important to recognize that, and then but also not be so hard on yourself for falling into those things. Personally, I started journaling was my thing, was how I quit like watching television and getting off of like social media. Like I stepped back from all of that and was like, okay, let me get into my own head and my own thoughts and what do I have to share. And then I realized that it was becoming an antisocial behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't any better than sitting and scrolling through my phone. It was just like writing. I wasn't actually working anything out. It was just, so maybe that's not exactly what you mean, but like we have our things that we do that it's time to kind of level up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. In Carlos Castaneda's book series, he talks about kind of being self-indulgent. And for me, like the ways that I was going about healing myself, kind of like journaling, it was like for you it became self-indulgent, where it was really like so gratifying that I shut the world out and I was escaping from focusing on real things in just a different way, in a way that was maybe more socially acceptable, but in a way that was still damaging and unhealthy. And I think that really is important to see, and that's kind of the wisdom of the hermit. And it does transition into the Wheel of Fortune in some regard too, because when you look at it, looking at the numerology of it, the 1 and the 0 is the magician and the fool, as we had talked about. So it's kind of recognizing the foolishness in that pattern and then understanding that we can create something different from it, and also creating the emptiness by recognizing it. Because for me, once I have knowledge of something, it can lose a lot of power over me, unless I consciously act on it. So then it becomes this fortunate experience where you can begin to shape your fate more so than anything.
That makes a ton of sense. And I feel as though people who are listening are really going to resonate with that. I think there's been a big push also of, I kind of think that when we went, everybody kind of was going through these like big spiritual crises, and there's a time and a place for focusing on self-care, and there's a time and a place for taking responsibility for how we use self-care as an avoidance tactic.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things for me that was somewhat tricky, because I had really worked hard to avoid that amount of self-care, to where any kind of relaxing and, like, say, playing video games for a day seemed really defeatist and empty to me. But like, I had to do that. My therapist even told me, like, dude, you have to chill out. I'll show you chill.
Jill?
What's that?
Your therapist's name is Jill?
No. I said, I'll show you chill.
Oh, chill. Sorry, I thought you said Jill. I was like, oh, that's my mom's name.
I'll show Jill too, damn it. No. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say on that. Like, anything else that you want to add before we move forward?
No, I think we're good. So we're going to talk about the Wheel of Fortune. And you already eloquently explained the numerology of it. And I think it's interesting too that when we were in the fives are a time of contraction,
Mm-hmm.
or the expansion, and the 10 is both the contraction and the expansion.
Oh, I like that.
Which kind of summarizes everything that we were just speaking about, and really what the journey of the 1 through the 10 are. It's all encompassing experiences, and then finding the closure to move on. And with the Wheel of Fortune, it's both, I believe, the individual and the universe working together to instigate the change.
I would agree with that. I mean, realistically, we're part of the universe, but yeah, we all are so separate, macrocosm and microcosm or whatever.
Exactly. This is a card that no matter if it's upside down or right side up, I read it exactly the same, because it's a circle and it's always spinning. What I've learned, and I think is very interesting, is once we take action, we set things in motion. Mm-hmm. And the universe goes with that momentum. And that can be an amazing experience. It can be overwhelming. There's so many different things that could bring in. But the important thing to remember is that when this card kind of comes up and you're in that energy of the universe kind of rotating and shifting, and sometimes you're at the top of the wheel, sometimes you're at the bottom, and the only thing that you can control is kind of staying close to the center. And staying in the center of the wheel is focusing on really all that you can actually have control of, which sometimes the only thing that might be in your control is keeping your apartment clean, or showing up to where you said you would show up to on time. Mm-hmm. You know, being accountable and responsible for your emotional response to people and to things.
And those are the things that really set everything else in motion too, is maintaining accountability and integrity with those things. That gives you the foundation to kind of get back in tune with everything else. And that's what I had even lost touch with personally, but I'm finding. again than it really is my relationship with me is what resolves all the other things outside of me.
Right.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about it. Can we see your card? Like, I looked through it yesterday, and I want to make sure that like I interpreted it right. So that is a magnifying glass on a brain, correct?
Not at all. I guess this one isn't very clear, but it's a reflection in a coffee cup.
Okay, I like that too. The magnifying glass on the brain, I was like, it's kind of dark, but like I like it. It makes a lot of sense, like really looking at your mind. But
it's looking down over a cup of coffee and seeing your own reflection kind of swirling in it.
No, I get that one too. I like that as well because it's kind of like taking that time. And you had said journaling, so it's taking that time and doing your journaling is what it reflects in your personal life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really dig that. I still like the magnifying glass in the brain too. I'm gonna see it as that.
That's great. That's the fun part about art. It's subjective, and I think that once people take, especially artists who are, their ego is so intertwined with their work that they think that their interpretation, because they're the creator, is it. And I think it's really funny because the way I see art is that I made something, I had a feeling, I had emotions, I made a thing, and then once I put it out there, then it's not mine anymore. Like I've given it up. I put it out there, and then people can do whatever they want. Like I had a woman reach out to me on Instagram, and she said, I really don't want you to be mad at me because I love your cards. She's like, but I was so inspired that I started coloring on them. And I want to post them because I post photos of my tarot pulls, but I don't want to offend you. So I wanted to tell you first and get your feelings. And I was like, wow, that's like very kind of you to think about my opinion, but you bought this thing and it is yours. You own it. You can do anything you want to it. And I love it. Like, creativity begets creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really cool. So now she has this like very colorful Moon Void tarot deck.
That's super cool. Yeah, she has the only one out there, and with her own unique approach to it as well, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this about the coffee cup thing. Do you think that maybe on subconscious level that you might even try to make it like have a double meaning? Is that possible?
I mean, anything is possible. I can't speak to my subconscious because that's running in the background.
Fair point. I was trying to ask you an open-ended, impossible question, but you handled it well.
Oh, thanks, Ross.
Yeah, I'm kind of a dick at times.
I guess the only thing that I have left to say on the wheel is that also when it comes up, it's really important to remember that all cycles are temporary and everything is always changing. So you may feel like shit right now and everything might feel like it's crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
And you may feel like you're in a tower moment, but if the wheel of fortune presents itself, then it's saying, you know what, that all needed to happen to get you back to the top of it. So just take a deep breath and calm down, clean your room, organize something, like do something small that will make you feel like you're being of service.
Mm-hmm.
To get your mind off it and get out of your head, because everything is always shifting.
I think that right there is like the big takeaway, and that's probably like one of the keys to living a happy life and kind of overcoming difficult things. And just as somebody who suffered with depression or things like that throughout my life, thinking that it was always going to be that way, and then not understanding that it was cyclical, and then through understanding cycles, like even knowing that it's going to pass at some point and it's just kind of riding the waves of it. Mm-hmm. That's super useful, and I really hope that could help somebody else. And also, like you had said, just doing that one little thing to shift the energy. And I would also add, like, to stop the spinning of the wheel, stop telling yourself a bunch of empty things. Like, recently I was telling myself, I can't do this. I can't get through this. I'm not going to make it through this. And that like just keeps that wheel spinning and spinning and spinning when you really just need it to stop by taking your mind off it by doing something constructive. Yeah. So moving into the other tens, I feel like we've taken this pattern of doing the heavy ones first and getting it out of the way, which I like. So do you want to start with the 10 of swords?
Absolutely. I have that right on top. So here's our 10 of swords.
I like it.
Thank you. I actually love the 10 of swords because it's really exaggerated.
It's like the drama queen card.
It is high key the drama queen card. You know, I feel like this is really taking being attached to your stories to like a really aggressive level. It's to have 10 swords in your back is really overkill. I mean, you can't do anything if you're allowing yourself to be martyred in this way and to feel stuck under your thoughts and stories. Everything comes down to a story we tell ourselves. There's the actual story and the truth, and there's our interpretation and how we feel, and then our minds concoct a story about it. So it's a 10, so it's a cycle ending. So when this card comes up, it's like, okay, you've known for a while that it's time to move on, and that you'll be so much happier when you put that story to bed. Take your power back.
Yeah, I really feel like it's a good follow-up to the anxiety card too. That's like the result of the anxiety is like being completely paralyzed. I really like how you talked about that it was largely self-inflicted in the whole martyrdom aspect, because I really do feel that, myself included, a lot of times we get into these stories and tell ourselves, this is what happened before. This is how it will always be. There's no point in even trying. I might as well just stay stuck. And that's like the most self-defeating, self-fulfilling prophecy you can tell yourself. What's the point at that stage in the game, really? One of the things that's been super helpful for me when I stay in touch with it is being in recovery. They talk about like carrying the message of hope. And on a regular basis, or when I regularly attend meetings, there's constantly this hope of what people have done to overcome like ridiculous odds to be where they're at. And I think that that's really important to remember. Like sometimes you need to have that moment where like somebody messes up your cappuccino and you flip out to kind of bring you back in touch with everything, where you're like, whoa, dude, what the fuck's going on here? But it is kind of like reeling it back and being like, is that really that big of a deal? And I'm curious about your opinion on this. Is this the card of first world problems? Is that a little bit heavy of a statement?
I mean, I don't want to say that. I feel like instead of saying that, I would say this is the card of things don't happen to you, they happen for you.
Okay. I like that.
A lot of times people think that when something awful happens, and it could be something small, like you said, somebody messing up your cappuccino order, or it could be something really big that was very traumatizing from your childhood. But the way to moving through that energy is to realize that everything that happens to you is happening for you to teach you how to cope, how to overcome, and how to forgive.
I definitely relate to that and can agree with that. Yeah, that's a lot more tactful way to say it in the card of first world problems, because it really minimizes the other ways that could show up. Well done, Stefanie. Well done.
Thank you. I think that a lot of us are really attached to, especially things that happened in our youth, and maybe things that happened with our families of origin.
Hmm.
or things that happened where you were bullied, like basically anything that happens when you're so young imprints on you in
Mm-hmm.
such a way that it affects all of your adult relationships and how you think. Like swords are air, they're mental.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's really brave to receive this card and realize that it's okay to change and to shift and to change the story. Just like the Wheel of Fortune, it's change.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. The last little thing I want to say and get your feedback on is Dr. Gabor Mate talks about trauma being things that should have happened that didn't, and things that didn't happen that should have. So it really is kind of about understanding all of us can have these different traumas that we carry on, and we're all impacted in some way. And realistically, unless we've all kind of consciously sorted those things out, everybody to varying degrees is somewhat on the spectrum of trauma and it impacting where they're at in life right now.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful point that you bring up.
That kind of saves me from the first world problems comment, I hope. Relieve some of the burden. And speaking of burden, we move on to the 10 of Wands. I have a question for you about this as well. So last night, we're releasing this after we're recording it. This is the 18th, and last night was the full moon. And since you're familiar with astrology and stuff like that, I'm curious. I found out that last night's full moon was supposed to be kind of like the 10 of Wands. What's your take on that?
I would certainly say so, for several reasons. It was 10 of Wands being fire, and it was the Sagittarius full moon. And Sagittarius is definitely known to burn the candle at both ends, and full moons are about release. The great thing about this full moon last night is Sagittarius in astrology rules the ninth house, which is higher learning, spirituality, and like publishing, study, and also like because the ninth house is at the very top of the astrological chart on that wheel, it's about future plans.
Hmm.
So I like to think of this full moon as being a big release of anything that was burdening you and holding you back from planting the correct seeds and taking proper actions to move forward into your future.
Hmm.
And also, this is the last full moon that we're going to have before eclipse season.
Uh-oh.
Whole other thing we'll discuss at a later date.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I kind of like how you shed more light on that too in regards to that, because it's kind of where I've been at with everything. And this is interesting, and maybe this is a topic we can discuss more later on in the future. But it's so weird to see how astrology really does sync up with your life, and not in like the cheesy newspaper sense of astrology, but in like these real ways if you're paying attention to what's going on in your life, and putting in footwork as well, seeing how it shows up. And I guess let's move into like the 10 of Wands and what it means. I mean, we had touched on it in regards to that, but it is kind of carrying this burden, doing the work, and then the ending element of it is that release.
Right. We kind of touched on that last week when we were talking about the nines and how it's, you're putting all of your effort and your passion and your creativity and your momentum and your drive and ambition and all these fiery terms into the things that you want. And I think the 10 of Wands is a time when you can kind of realize that either you're putting in all that effort and the payoff is just around the corner, or sometimes it's you see that you've been putting all of your effort into something that's just draining you, and it's time to release yourself from that. A lot of times, especially in our interpersonal relationships, we want so badly for something to work the way we want it to work that we do the work for ourselves and for the other person.
Codependency type stuff.
It's codependency, but it's also us trying to give ourselves what we want to receive, but we can't be giving and also giving back to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Tell my story.
your story is my story, is everybody's story. It's like going to a beautiful wellspring of water and having like the most delicious drink of it, and then continuing to show up to it after it's run dry. And trying to tap a dry well, and you're like starving to death when you could set it down and go over and see something much more nourishing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the 10 of Wands is a card about being really, really drained.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. That was a very fitting card for last night, and it's interesting how doing that ceremony, I've kind of released myself of that energy and positioned myself to move forward with it. Hopefully other people kind of tap into that as well. And if you are kind of being in the 10 of Wands position, let it go. Let me ask you this about this card real quick too. So some of it could be letting the thing go, but some of it's also letting your perspective of how things should be go, right? And then also really just understanding that things can work out different than how you assume them. And relating to the Wheel of Fortune, some of that goes into the concept of, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this right. I guess it's like that Rolling Stones song. You don't always get what you want, but I don't know how the lyrics go. You get what you need.
Yes. Exactly. And sometimes what you need is several. It's a very layered meaning. Sometimes what you need is to learn that you could handle, like if you look at this as far as responsibility, looking at it as you were able to handle all of that responsibility. But moving forward, it's okay for you to delegate out that responsibility, take away what you really enjoyed from the process, and make sure the next opportunity, your boundaries are properly set up.
I like that. Looking at your card too, one of the things that I want to add about the Moon Void Tarot card, and I'd rather ask you a question about it. Do you have the branches in front of the open universe as kind of showing it like blocking the openness and blocking the expanse of everything as part of the burden?
It was kind of like feeling stuck in the forest. And
lost in the woods.
Yeah, feeling lost in the woods and in the darkness about things.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious because I like it a lot. I don't think I've seen one of your cards where I'm like, this is shit. Like I liked all of them.
Thanks.
That was like the weirdest compliment ever.
It's okay. An exercise in humility was typing Moon Void Tarot into like Google and finding a bunch of YouTube videos with people saying stuff about and getting people's opinions. And you're like, wow. Like I said, it's subjective, and I put something out and not everybody's gonna like it or understand it or like a modern interpretation of tarot. Some people are very set in their ways of they want it this way, this is how they like it. And I think it's important to remember we're all a special flavor, and we're not going to be for everybody.
I think that's super, super important to remember that. One thing else though too is it's a lot easier for people to tear down what somebody has built because they haven't done it themselves in one capacity. And the other thing too is I really feel that if you make something that everybody loves, you've probably sold out yourself. So like, I think both of those are valid points, and it's not to diminish other people's opinions, but it really is easy to be a critic when people haven't done something themselves, and it's also really easy to it shows you're not pandering. It's like you're going to grow so much more from creating something true to you. So fuck them. Uh, that's not her words. That's mine. You can quote me on
Love it.
that. What card do you want to move on to next?
I'm interested to hear your interpretation of the 10 of Pentacles.
So for me, like, it's interesting. This is probably the card that I'm avoiding the most in some regard in like my personal life. But it's really being integrated in society and finding the richness of community in some regard is how I would take it. Like finding connection, feeling a part of, and kind of being present to foster goodwill in community and showing up for people. That's how I would take it.
I like that. Why are you avoiding it?
Part of it's me wanting to tell myself that, like, by starting a meetup group that's supposed to help people, I'm really not. And I realized like the hypocrisy of me saying that after I did it. Cause like, I'm actually like, that's what I'm working towards right now. But on a real level, being close to people in a real way and building relationships with people is scary to me because most of my experience is based upon the old stories and carrying that old weight. So most of my life is built on the other two tens that we've talked about so far. And then moving into the community aspect of everything is intimidating because, for one, I'm worried I'll let everybody down again. I'm worried I'll burn bridges again. All of these old things that I've done that, plus I don't want to have to, like, being a part of a community requires a lot of compassion and patience and all of that stuff. And it's really easy for me to show up in limited amounts on that way for people. But at the same time, I found that by being overly nurturing in those situations, you can be harmful to people. And I don't really want to be direct with people as well. It's a big responsibility, I guess, to be part of a community. That's the simplest way I can put it without rambling anymore. Yeah.
No, that's a very valid fear. Thank you for opening up and sharing that. I think that a lot of people stay behind their computer screens and their phones because interacting with other humans, while it comes from a place of goodwill and good intention, the human experience, we're all projecting onto one another and reacting, and things get messy the more the closer you get. So it can be a scary thing and it cannot feel safe or controlled, but I think that the more you engage with it and that you're open to the possibility of the connection, without the fear that it's all going to fall to shit. I mean, from your experience, from my experience, and I'm sure listeners' experiences, we often look to the past to give us guidance for our future, but you're in a completely different energy now.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the past, I'm in a completely different energy. Other people, you're not going to necessarily repeat your patterns if you've done the internal work.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Understanding that and then like living it out is different things though too in lots of regards. Like, because if I have awareness of the patterns, I've most likely resolved them to some extent or I'm working through it. But it also doesn't mean that like 20 some years of fear is just going to disappear. Like, it really is just nurturing myself and being patient as I go through that whole process. And over the past couple of years, like, I've literally had more community in my life than I've ever had my entire life. So I've built up a good foundation, but it is going back to the hermit's like a safe place for me because I only have to deal with me, and for whatever it's familiar misery. I'll get through it. So what is your 10 of Pentacles? What is your card and what is your definition of it or how you see it?
I see it a little differently, although I very much respect and agree with your interpretation. Mine is a nice big house that is kind of, you see the front gate, and the gate has the pentacles, and the gate is slightly ajar. So being that this is the expansion and the contraction, I think that a lot of us are working towards stability, financial stability, and also a lot of us are working towards maybe building what that looks like for us, while simultaneously leaving behind what it looked like in our past. So you can interpret that as going through that gate to the house, or you can interpret it as leaving through the gate out into the world. And depending on where you are on the wheel is how that's going to affect you. It has a lot to do with wealth consciousness and our mindset around money and having things in the world, our spiritual bodies versus our human bodies, things that our family of origin versus the family that we create through our friendships and possible children.
I like that. So what does that prosperity, or what does that look like to you? What is your vision of that for yourself?
So not to get too personal, but growing up, and my father wasn't in the military. He just had a lot of wanderlust, and he was very adventurous and couldn't sit still. The grass was always greener. So we moved every 2 to 3 years. And I would leave schools in the middle of the school year and start over. And I did very poorly in school because the curriculums all over the country were never the same. And I was always like playing catch up, and never had that foundation of stability. You know, you look to your family of origin as creating your stability. And my parents didn't actually ever even buy a house until 2 months before I moved out when I was 18 forever. So my room in that home was temporary. And as an adult, like, all I've ever wanted is to like find my place. So that's my dream house on it. All I want in this world is to be able to buy myself a house and stay in one place.
That's simple. Yeah, that's definitely achievable too. It's a nice tangible dream to have.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the 10 of Cups.
Yes.
What does your 10 of Cups look like?
My 10 of Cups is a couple standing, looking out at the stars underneath kind of like the 10 cups.
That was one of the ones that really stuck out to me when I went through it the other day, yesterday when I went through your cards. And I really liked that one a lot. It's like a very peaceful vibe to it.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites, and I feel like I'm telling a lot of stories today, so you can tell me to shut up if.
No, you're fine. I talk a lot about myself too. No, I think that it adds more to everything. I really think that telling our stories helps people understand the cards more.
Yeah. So this, like, the person on this 10 of Cups, and I love that the 10, like, it's very fitting because 10s are a cycle of completion and then moving on. And this was the first person that I really cared about after my divorce. And it was also a person that was super toxic and awful for me. But I think that his presence in my life was there to show me that I was capable of feeling love again. And I left a situation that wasn't aligned for me in order to find like what my happy family looks like. And I thought about taking him off the card, but I was like, you know what? It was an ending of that cycle. It was like the culmination of things, and it was only temporary. just like the wheel, every situation, that like that great love you feel maybe is just there for a very short moment to show you that you're capable of feeling that deeply.
I would also say that it shows a lot of growth and maturity on your part to be able to keep that person on there despite maybe it ending and them not being good for you. One of the things that I'm incredibly grateful of on my own personal journey is the ability to look at all my previous relationships now, regardless of how they ended or how things went, being able to have respect and like compassion and a level of love, maybe not the same romantic love, but like wanting the best for those people and just respecting them and understanding that that was meaningful at the time. And I think that's a lot better place to be in than being like, fuck this person, piece of shit. Like, and for me, like when my parents divorced, that's kind of how that whole thing was for a very long time. So it was really important for me to learn to just respect that and not have all the attachment that we do in our culture. Because one of the things is attachment isn't always pining for the person. Attachment can also be the attachment of this person's a piece of shit just because it didn't work out how I wanted to, or I didn't get what I want. I don't know. I think there's a lot of freedom in that and how you express it and decided to keep it on there. So I have a lot of respect for that.
Thank you. But you're absolutely right. A lot of people, again, with the stories that we like to stick to, a lot of people that I come in contact with and friends and just stories, they get stuck on the person instead of the thing about that relationship that was good for them. Instead of saying, hey, I learned from this relationship that I'm capable of XYZ, they get stuck on, well, that person's the only person that I was able to do this, that, or the other with.
A very limiting way to look at it. One of the things too that I think is super funny, a lot of times people, myself included, oh man, my thoughts just went right out the window. That's amazing. Must not be important. Let me give it a second and see if it comes back to me. Oh yeah, they only focus on the other person's part and everything. Like this person was this, that, or the other. And they never really look at what they contributed to the relationship that might not have been healthy or how their expectations created the problem. And for me, like really understanding that helped me find peace with the other person on a deeper level. And it's not to like overlook other people's shit, but part of the reason why I attracted toxic people is because I was toxic. I don't think a lot of people want to have that conversation and be like, I probably wasn't in a good space then. Like,
it's so important. Our outer world reflects our inner world. And that was kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about taking responsibility for your actions. And a lot of people are very quick to blame other people or point out their flaws because they're unconsciously projecting what it is that they need to work on within themselves. And when that happens, you're actually not seeing the other person clearly. Like maybe this person is not a bad person at all. Maybe it didn't work because, or all the things happened because I was not emotionally available and I was in my own toxicity. And I'm fully okay with that because that was, we always say about the cups that water seeks its own level. So if you find yourself around a bunch of people that aren't valuing you, then maybe look at how you're not valuing yourself and go with that instead of continually having expectations of other people to validate you.
I agree with that 100%. On my own personal journey, really figuring out that I was the common denominator in every relationship that I've been in, and that if all my relationships are shit, maybe it's not always the other person. Maybe I have a part in that, was like super mind blowing to me. Like, wait a minute, I'm the common thread in every problem I've ever had. That was kind of ridiculous. And in regards to like the projection thing, last week I heard somebody say, if you spot it, you got it. Like, I was like, I love that. I'm so going to like pocket that term and use it all the time. But I think that that's really true as well. And yeah, 10 of Cups for me really is about kind of that like emotional, deep emotion and deep connection. And like seriously, what this card represents is really kind of what I want in my life, like more so than the 10 of Pentacles. I just want the 10 of Cups, like that emotional kind of thing. Except I don't want the fucking kids running around.
All right, so we'll sub them for your dogs, and you'll have fur babies, and that's totally fine. That's why there are no children on my card, because family looks different. Everybody's idea, just like the 10 of Pentacles, you know, your idea of stability in the tangible world is completely different than any other person's, and nobody's more right or wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just from everything I've been through, like material stability. I mean, it's cool, obviously, but I'm cool with like living in a yurt on like a small piece of property and like living very simply. But yeah, so real quick to like recap everything, unless you have anything else you want to add to any of this.
I just think that my final thought on it goes back to what we said about the Wheel of Fortune being that everything is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes for your pain, but that also goes for those high highs, like your, you know, in the more positive cards, those like financial stability and emotional fulfillment, like what is good now, it could all change. So you can't really hold on and set your worth in those things.
I agree. My whole point on like a lot of it is like I've had such a deficit in the emotional stability thing. Like I feel like the universe owes me something to balance it out, which will probably come back to bite me in the ass. Universe, you better not welch on this, you piece of shit.
I have no words.
That's how I feel about myself most days too. I'm getting better though. So yeah, Wheel of Fortune is kind of about possibilities, rolling with the punches, and taking your wins and your losses, but looking for the overall lesson in everything, good, bad, indifferent.
Yes.
10 of Swords is, I'm going to let you explain that one so I don't dig myself into a ditch.
10 of Swords is about healing and moving on from your stories that you've been telling yourself, reaching the point of overkill and finally like doing the work in the healing work.
And then 10 of Wands is also like transitions from that somewhat. It's about like letting down that burden that you've been carrying. In 10 of Swords, not that they're related in that capacity, but they're similar. Not carrying the burden and letting go of your difficulties, real or imagined, and moving forward as well, correct?
Yes.
And how about 10 of Pentacles?
10 of Pentacles is about the culmination of material satisfaction. And then again, like these are all, there's a lot of like movement because they're endings of cycles. So it could be going to the next level.
Okay.
So it's achieving and then realizing that nothing stays the same. You have to continually set goals for yourself and not want more, like materialistically more, like just
don't get complacent.
Right.
I have a question for you on the 10 of Pentacles real quick before we move on. So it's interesting. It talks about kind of like that material satisfaction. And my question is more so about, could it be that the reason that I see more community is because that's the one thing that I've probably wanted most of my life, is feeling that sense of community, and for you, stability is represented in the house?
Absolutely. You know, whatever stability looks like to you is what that means. So for me, it's being able to buy a home for myself and to be able to put down roots somewhere because I don't feel like I'm from anywhere. And for you, it's being able to identify and with a community of people that you feel safe and nurtured and you can put roots down in that.
I like that. Rooted in ground, or rooted in expansion is my words for the year, and I've definitely been feeling the root aspect come up. And then 10 of Cups is kind of like that emotional overflowing, that deep emotional connection, and kind of all of that. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a card that echoes like a happy family and emotional fulfillment, whatever that looks like. That could look like an incredible group of friends. That could look like a loving relationship. That could look like a family, like whatever that means to you. It's just being able to have all of that. And also being mindful of all of your experiences in the past, adding to what the healthy version of it looks like. I think that all of the 10s have a big element of forgiveness in them. Because in order to move on from your past, to be able to set your burdens down, to be able to have healthy relationships, and to be able to have stability in the world, I think that you can't hang on to resentment and hurt. I think that's part of the wheel turning, is forgiveness and forgiving yourself and people involved.
There's a quote, I want to say it's Buddha or somebody like that, but it's like, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's essentially like not giving forgiveness is burning the bridge that you two must cross, or something like that.
Yeah.
And forgiveness really is more so for you than for the other person as well, which is difficult to hear, but there's a lot of truth to it. One thing I want to add to the 10 of Cups that I noticed while you were kind of going over it too is the rainbow on the Rider-Smith-Waite one. It has the red, the light blue, and then the yellow. So in regards to chakra, red's root chakra, which is kind of like feeling that material grounded, like being grounded in the material world. Light blue is the throat chakra, like being able to speak your truth. And then the yellow is navel chakra, which is like feeling confident in your sense of self. And I think that's interesting, especially if you look at how it ties into that emotional well-being, because being grounded in reality is super important. Being able to speak your truth is important. And then all of that is kind of encapsulated in feeling good about yourself. So
no, that's wonderful. Thank you for bringing that. I always love it when you give your interpretation of colors, which I think is really funny that you're so in tune with color theory and how that plays into like our chakras and feelings. And my deck is black and white.
yeah, it's going to be difficult for me to read it. That's a good thing though, to be like challenged by it in some regard. Just like Wild Unknown's challenging for me. Yours will be challenging for me in different ways, and it will kind of make me think of like, what would Stefanie Caponi do?
No more terrifying words have ever been spoken.
So I guess that this is the end of everything. Real quick, if people have any questions for myself or for Stefanie, you can reach out to us via Instagram at Spiritual Phoenix or at Oracle Motion. For me, Stefanie Caponi can be reached at Stefanie Caponi or at Moon Void Tarot. You can also send me an email. You can reach Stefanie Caponi on her website. You could also buy the Moon Void Tarot there. Or where else can they get the Moon Void Tarot?
You can get it from my website, moonvoidtarot.com, or on Etsy, which is just Moon Void Tarot on Etsy.
Okay. And that's really all I have. Stefanie, I want to thank you. And I know that you dislike having the last word, so I'm going to give it to you.
What? Not what I thought you were going to say, Derek. So I want to tell everybody thank you for sticking with us and listening. And I'm really excited for next week's episode. We're going to be going over justice, and we're moving into the court cards. So we're going to tackle the pages. We will see you then. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you for listening. If you love this show, one kind review goes a long way. If you have a question or comment you'd like read on air, please send your email to staff@spiritualphoenixstudios.com or use the link in the show notes.